So that's what it looks like. You know, in a lot of ways it does resemble pound cake. Not quite as dense, but close, right? But you know, a lot easier to make, as you saw, right? But yeah. Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and it is raining cats and dogs outside, and I thought it was a good day to make some cake. And this episode's got nothing to do with gardening. It's about making cake from scratch. And if you are new to making cake and you're a person who has always found that when you try to make a cake from scratch, you just don't like the way it turns out, and so you're inclined to buy a cake mix or buy a cake that's already been made and that sort of thing, and you like cake, you can save a lot of money making your own cake from scratch. And it's not hard if you got the right recipe and you know how to do it. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to make a really basic cake. It's just vanilla, you know, a white vanilla cake. The recipe here is called Yellow Cake, right? And this is just a recipe. I don't know, I must have originally got it from a magazine or something like that, but I've made little adjustments to the ingredients and so on. But I'm going to walk you through this. So the idea here is to make a cake using the most basic ingredients and the most basic equipment. So I don't have a cake mixer or anything like that. The main tool we're going to use is a fork and measuring spoons and a measuring cup. So it's really low key, really low tech, all right? So let's get started. So all we got to do for this cake is, first step is to get some flour in the bowl. And this one here calls for 2 1/4 cups of flour. I'll put the ingredients up on the screen, and I'll put them in the you know, show notes or whatever this is called, the description box for the YouTube video. And you can see I'm not being overly fussy about the measurements, right? I'm being sort of close enough is good enough sort of approach to measuring the ingredients, and that's fine for this particular recipe. You know, depending on how perfect you measure everything, it may be more or less, you know, fluffy or loose or dense or whatever. And actually this cake, the way it turns out, it's not unlike a pound cake. It's pretty close. It's not exactly, it's certainly not a pound cake, but it's close to a pound cake, and who doesn't like pound cake, right? So it's pretty close to a pound cake, but ridiculously easy. So I've got 2 1/4 cups of flour here. Now I'm going to put some sugar in here. We need 1 1/3 cup of sugar. This is a cake I make whenever I need a cake quick. You got company coming over, you don't have a lot of time, you want to put out a dessert that's pleasing to everyone. Who doesn't like a vanilla cake with vanilla icing? For me anyway, I like it a lot. And I'll also do the icing as well, because I'm always amazed that people buy icing, because the store-bought icing is, you know, stuff you buy in a little tub, to me is terrible. And it's so easy to make, so easy to make. So I'm going to show you how to make the icing too when we get to that point. Anyway, so we got 1 1/3 cup of sugar now. So now I'm just going to combine those two ingredients a little bit with my fork, high-tech mixing tool, fork. You know, multi-use, multitasking with the fork. All right. And now we're going to add the only leavener that is required for the recipe, which is baking powder. And you're going to use 3 teaspoons of baking powder. 1, 2, 3. All right. And we're going to put some salt in here too. This calls for half a cup of, half a cup, that would be something, half a teaspoon of salt. All right, so we got that in there. I'll put these over to the side, so I know, I like to put everything that's going in is on the right, everything that's done is on the left, so you don't put stuff in twice, right? Okay, so we got our salt, we got our baking soda, we got all our dry ingredients incorporated into the mixture now. I'm just going to mix that around, and for me, I sort of just do a circling motion with the fork for about, you know, a count of, I'm not counting here because I'm talking, but a count of about 20, right? That should do it. You want to make sure everything is well incorporated and well randomized within the dry ingredients. So for every cubic centimeter of flour, we've got some salt, some baking powder, some sugar, right? So let's just run on the assumption that I've done that properly. Okay, that's our dry. Now, there's all kinds of different ways to combine your dry and your wet, and there's all kinds of, what would you call that? Doctrines about the right and wrong way to do that. But this is a quick cake that you make in a hurry. And so this is a one bowl cake. So all you do is you take your flour and just tap it in the bowl until it's almost about to come out like that, right? So basically I've moved the dry over to one side. Set it like that. So I got the dry stuff sort of banked up over here, and I got a little space here on the right. Okay? So now I'm going to put my wet on the right. So what do we need for the wet? We need 2 eggs. All right, so we got 1 egg here. There you go. And another egg. All right, recipe calls for 2 eggs. All right, that's good. Calls for a teaspoon of vanilla. Put that in. I think I might have overshot that a little bit, but that's okay. Put a vanilla over there so we know we've already put that in. Calls for half a cup of oil, and you notice I'm using my dry cup measure for the wet ingredient. For this recipe, it doesn't matter. I'm sure using the wet ingredient measuring cup is better, but you can use the dry, okay? I'm thinking back to my university days when you don't have all the equipment in the world. You're just running on the most basic of things, right? So I'm trying to make this recipe from that point of view. So we get half a cup of oil. Now we're going to put a cup of milk. I am one of these poor suckers that cannot digest dairy if a gun was held to my head, so I'm putting in this rice milk stuff, which I find is okay. It's just, it's got no flavor in it. It's just rice and some kind of sugar and some kind of water and a couple other chemicals that make it taste kind of like milk. But if you can use milk, use milk, okay? So it just calls for 1 cup of milk, okay? Milk, or in this case, imitation milk, right? Use whatever, milk-like thing suits your fancy. All right, so we got that in there. Okay, that's our wet. Let me bring the camera in here. Let me show you the process of how we incorporate these 2 things together. Okay, so you see I got the flour over here, and I got all the wet over here. So I'm just going to stab the 2 egg yolks, right? And tilt the bowl a little bit and just start mixing the wet ingredients together. The egg, the oil, the milk, right? All those coming together, and the vanilla, of course. And you can add, it calls for a teaspoon of vanilla. You can add a little bit more, a little bit less. You could totally skip the vanilla, I suppose, but I wouldn't recommend it. And I'm sure there's ways to, this is a basic cake recipe, so there's ways to adjust it so that it's, chocolate and so on and so forth. And if you want, I can do, if there's enough comments in the comment section, I can do that as well. But so now to my mind, I've done a good job of mixing the wet ingredients with each other using the fork. So now I'm going to slowly bring the flour into it. Not all at once, just a little bit. And what we're doing here is adding air to the equation as we bring the flour in. And of course, you can use a mixer, you can use a whisk, you can use an electric mixer, you can use, you can make this as decadent and fanciful as you want. But what I'm telling you is if you just use a fork, you're going to have a delicious cake anyway. And of course you can, put the dry together, put the wet together, and then add them together, separately from separate bowls. That's good practice, and that's, I'm sure there's people with a baking background that are just appalled at what I'm doing here right now. But this works. If you're in a rush and you're trying to keep the dishes down, or if you're on a low budget, you're in, college, university, or just whatever your situation is in life, you can do it this way. And it's just, you know, such a quick, easy way to make cake. Such basic ingredients. Okay, we got that combined. You know what I forgot to do was turn the oven on. You're supposed to turn the oven on before you start mixing this. So I'm going to turn the oven on right now. Where I live, 350 for 35 minutes. So let's put it on 350. The idea is you turn the oven on, and by the time you're done mixing this up, the oven's at temperature. I didn't exactly do that, so it's okay. Anyway, you get this all mixed up, and you know it says 350 for 35 minutes. That's the instructions here. That's using a 9-inch pan, and this works for me where I live relatively close to sea level. I mean, if I start walking that way in a straight line, which I can't do, but let's say I could, I would be at the ocean in about, well, let's not say about, but I'm about 2-3 kilometers from the ocean. It's that way. If I take the roads, it's about a 10-15 minute drive to the ocean. So I'll give you a sense of where I am relative to sea level. I'm pretty close to sea level. I don't know if I'm 100 or 200 meters above sea level, but there are days, if I go outside, I'm in the backyard, I can smell the ocean. Okay, so I've got everything incorporated here, and now I'm just going to mix everything. Same thing, 20 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Moving everything around from time to time, right? 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 19, 20. Right? Just moving some stuff around, all right? Okay, so our cake's mixed. Pretty easy, right? Now, we'll put this in a pan. This is a 9x9 pan. I don't know what this is in metric, but 9 inches by 9 inches. You can just, you know, people often comment on my videos. Why are you doing this in metric? You should do everything in imperial. And weird thing about living in Canada is we do everything in both, depending. You can tell how old someone is by whether they use one or the other. I use both because I was born in the 70s. Canada adopted a metric system at some point around then. So people my generation tend to use both. Anyway, it's easy enough to Google it and just find the conversion. So this is a 9x9 pan, greased. Okay, if you've got a Teflon pan, you don't need to do that. I've greased it with this, what's it called, dairy-free margarine, but if you can have butter, use butter, right? Or whatever other substitute that you think is the best thing. Okay, it doesn't matter. Main thing is that your pan's greased, thoroughly greased, right? And I use my hand so I can feel everything, so I know it's slippery all the way around. Okay, so we're just gonna put this all in the pan, and then, you know, let the kids lick off the spoon and the bowl as a reward for good behavior or whatever, right? All right, so the oven's at 350, so we're gonna stick this in there for 35 minutes. They got the oven rack on the second to highest, you know, in terms of the height of the rack, second to highest setting. So not the very highest, but second to highest. Okay, that's an important little distinction. And we're going to set the very old school timer to 35 minutes. And then we'll check it. We'll see you in 35 minutes. All right, so while we're waiting for the cake to bake, I thought why not make the icing and show you how that's done. Of course, when the cake comes out, we'll have to wait. You know, you put it on put it up on a drying rack, let it cool for about 2 hours, I would guess. So this is all timing. If you got company coming over for 5:30, the cake has to be out of the oven by 3 o'clock, 3:30 if you're going to be able to ice it, because icing sugar has to go on a cooled cake. You know that, right? So anyway, I'm using the recipe from the bag here. Most icing sugar usually comes with instructions on how to make buttercream icing. This is my variation on that because the instructions they always give you are way too much icing for a cake. Anyway, so what I'm going to do here is put in 2 cups. Always make sure you've got a little bit more icing sugar than what your ingredients call for, just in case when you mix it up it's too wet. So I have some left over here, right? But anyway, 2 cups of the icing sugar and 2 heaping tablespoons of butter. This is just dairy-free margarine, but you use whatever. If you can use butter, use that, but you use whatever works for you. The recipe actually calls for even more butter than this, but I just find it too buttery for my liking anyway. So 2 cups of flour, 2 heaping tablespoons of fake butter, or real butter, depending on what you can use. And it calls for a teaspoon of vanilla. So I'm just going to eyeball that here using my tablespoon. About a teaspoon of vanilla. A little more, a little less won't kill you. All right, you got that. And it calls for how much milk? It calls for 2 tablespoons of milk, so I'm just going to go with 1 because I'm using a half recipe here. So 1 tablespoon of milk. Okay, just using a soup spoon, but it comes out okay. And again, if it's a bit too wet as we mix this up, we'll just add a little more icing sugar to even that out. But you should, if you're a regular eater of cake, you shouldn't be buying icing. It's really easy to make icing sugar. It's not a complicated, thing at all. All you need is a fork and a bowl. You don't need anything special. So you just mix that around, right? And just keep mixing. I mean, unless you've got, this might be difficult if you've got, advanced arthritis or something like that, but this doesn't take a lot of effort. Remember, you can use more icing if you want, but for this size cake, I think 2 cups of icing sugar is about right. So now I've got it all incorporated together. It should make peaks. If you notice your peaks are falling a little bit, you can add, by peaks I mean like when you lift the fork up, does it make points, and do the points stay straight up or not? To me, this is a little bit wet, and it's very humid today, so this is why the ingredients, the instructions for something like this, you can play with them a little bit. So to my mind, this seems a little bit wet. It would be fine. I'm being a bit of a perfectionist here, so I'm going to add 2 tablespoons more. If it was a drier day, I probably wouldn't need this, right? But it's been raining cats and dogs outside, and it's very humid. It's 98% humidity outside, just to give you an indication of that. 73% humidity in the house. So when you're working with any sort of flour type thing, the humidity matters. All right, so yeah, this is sort of like the, I guess you could call it low-fat icing sugar, low fat but high sugar. This is not a health food, right? Don't think that because you're using this icing sugar you can eat twice as much. That would be a flawed reasoning, right? But anyway, just give it a few goings over with the fork. I've changed the bowl and I've changed the fork from when I made the cake because you don't want the cake had raw egg, right? But this icing sugar is ready. This is ready to put on the cake. See how easy that was? Don't buy icing sugar. It's really easy to make icing sugar. If you wanted to make this into a chocolate icing sugar, it's also, or icing, cake icing, chocolate, it's equally as easy. So yeah, don't buy pre-made icing, cake icing. It's so easy to make cake icing once you understand the basic principles, right? You don't want it too wet. You don't want it too dry. You want it to be rich with a little bit of butter, but you mostly want it to be sweet, right? So there we are, cake icing. We'll see you in a little bit when the cake's ready. All right, so it's been 35 minutes, actually about 36. I had to turn the camera on and all that sort of stuff. So 36 minutes. Let's check the cake. So bring this out. And bearing in mind, on any given day, you need a little bit more time. So I got a dry skewer toothpick sort of thing, put it right in the center, draw it out, and you can see this toothpick is telling me it's not ready yet. There's still some wet stuff on the toothpick. Okay, it should come out dry. So I'm going to put it in for another 2-3 minutes, see what happens. All right, so but it's been another 3 minutes. Let's check it again. This is just part of making cake. You check things, test, take it out, check it. You know, on any given day, the results are different because you know, really what you're trying to do is remove a certain amount of moisture from the cake mixture so that it becomes a proper cake. Also, just using this sort of pan, right? This pan is better at removing moisture than a high narrow pan. So if you had it in a high narrow pan, you'd need more time or more heat, some combination of those sorts of things. And of course, depending on your elevation relative to sea level, it might take more time to cook this. I'm in Nova Scotia, I'm a couple kilometers from the ocean, so the time I used here, 35 minutes plus 3, may not work for you. Might need 35 minutes or 40 minutes or so on. So, you know, depending on your elevation relative to sea level, adjust things accordingly, play it around a few times. Mark down how long it took when you made it and use that as a baseline. You know, so today looks, we'll see, let's have a look, let's see. Put the stick in here, comes out clean. See, another 3 minutes, it's totally clean. That's all it took, all right? All right, so in a couple hours after this is dried, I'll put the icing on here, and it's just a delightful, basic vanilla cake. Like a pound, not exactly a pound cake, but think about a pound cake that's slightly lighter, right? You know how dense a pound, if you've ever bought a pound cake or something like that, pound cake's wonderful. Think about a pound cake, and a little bit lighter than that, that's what you're getting here, okay? So basic cake, easy to make, will brighten up even a rainy day like it is today. Stop buying cake mix, learn how to make cake from scratch. All you need is a bowl and a fork. It doesn't have to be very sophisticated. Of course, if you're gonna go on one of those TV shows and be like a cake master or something like that, you probably need better skills. But I'm talking about making a tasty dessert for your guests that no one's gonna have a problem with. This is it, easy to make, okay? So I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Of course, have fun in your gardening, but you know, if it's a rainy day, make some cake and enjoy your life. So thanks for watching. See you next time. All right, so it's the next day and I got better light for filming this, and you can see I got into it a little bit last night. Don't judge me. So I'm gonna cut into this and just show you what you know, as well as is possible over a screen, the texture. So that's what it looks like. You know, in a lot of ways it does resemble pound cake. Not quite as dense, but close, right? But you know, a lot easier to make as you saw, right? But yeah, and it's, you know, it's good. Very yummy.